Dallas ISD students deserve the best possible opportunities for learning that we can offer. Their future and the future of our city depend on it. In 1990, a committee of community members and school staff conducted extensive research on ways to fairly access academic growth. Over the years, this system has been refined and then revised by numerous experts in educational evaluation. The results led to the development of the effectiveness indices. Dallas ISD uses classroom effectiveness indices, or CEIs, and school effectiveness indices, called SEIs, as value-added models to track academic growth within the classroom and the schools. In this video, we'll explore what CEIs and SEIs are. We'll examine the guidelines for creating CEIs and SEIs, and learn how CEIs and SEIs are computed. First, classroom effectiveness indices. CEIs measure the achievement of an individual student when compared to other similar students in the district. These students have the same characteristics and the same previous level of achievement or base test scores. CEIs measure the amount of academic progress students made after receiving a year of instruction from a teacher. Although CEIs are based on test scores, they do not depend on whether a student passed a specific test, but rather on the score a student received on a test. School effectiveness indices measure a school's success in increasing the academic achievement of all students from year to year. Instead of looking at groups of students taught by the same teacher, SEIs focus on the school as a whole, but gives a similar index that indicates the amount of growth students in a school experienced compared to students in other schools. Schools are held accountable only for the outcomes of continuously enrolled students. This means that the district uses test data only for students who have been enrolled at the school for most of a school year and who have a previous level of achievement and a current test score. Let's examine the guidelines for the classroom effectiveness indices. Specific criteria exist for including students in the analysis. For instance, as we mentioned, students must be continuously enrolled. They also must not have excessive absences. Students with more than 10 absences for a semester and more than 20 absences for the school year are excluded. Additionally, student tax results will be included only if the student has not been retained in the last 2 years. These criteria are used because we understand that unless the student is in the classroom for the majority of the instructional year, he or she hasn't had the opportunity to learn, and the teacher has not had the opportunity to teach. The CEI model also addresses outside influences over which the teacher has no control. These influences include the student's prior test scores, socioeconomic status, English language proficiency level, ethnicity, gender, neighborhood educational level, neighborhood income and poverty level. These characteristics help us to determine each individual student's comparison group. Now, let's examine what influences the school effectiveness indices. Just as we know there are outside influences that impact student learning in the classroom, we know there are influences at the school level outside of the school's control as well. The SEIs address these influences. School-level influences include school size, school stability rate, percentage of limited English proficient students, percentage of minority students, percentage of low-income students, family education level of the neighborhood, socioeconomic indicators of neighborhood education, and poverty index. SEIs include more indicators than simply test scores. These include school-wide attendance rates, graduation rates, SAT and PSAT, AP enrollment, the percentage of AP students passing. Now that we have a better understanding of what CEIs and SEIs include, let's see how each is computed. First, let's look at CEIs. We group students by their previous level of achievement. This is the number of test items the student answered correctly. For instance, if a 5th grade student gets 32 items correct on the tax math test, this student's initial comparison group includes other 5th grade students who got 32 items correct on the same math test. After we have grouped them by the same achievement level, Then these students are further grouped by common characteristics such as gender, ethnicity, LEP, and the other characteristics we listed earlier. Once we have identified similar students at the same academic level and use this method of common characteristics to put like students with like students, we have characterized and then subcharacterized the student. That's how we avoid comparing LEP students with non-LEP students and so forth. After we have grouped students, the average growth is computed for each group with the same starting test score and similar student characteristics. The average growth computation tells us how much change, on average, this group of students achieved during the school year. Some students will have exceeded the average growth, and some students will not have grown as much. Let's look at an example. On this chart, all students with the same student characteristics that got 20 items correct last year are grouped together. On average, the students who got 20 items correct last year then got 25 items correct this year demonstrate average growth for this group. Students who get fewer than 25 items correct would be below the average. Students who get more than 25 items correct would be above the average. Now, let's see how these individual scores turn into a teacher's CEI. Your students' individual scores are grouped by class and section. So you will have a CEI for each section of each course. Then you will have a course CEI, and finally a division CEI. CEIs are only computed for teachers of courses who administer the following tests: 1st and 2nd ITBS and Logramos, 3rd through 6th TAKS, 7th through 8th TAKS and ACPs, 9th through 12th TAKS and ACPs. Please remember, benchmark tests are never used for computing CEIs. Each student's score is standardized so that it can be added to other student scores in that section. Each student included in your CEI report is listed. You may see that some of your students are missing. Remember, students drop out of the computation if they are not continuously enrolled, have excessive absences, or have been retained. They must have previous and current test scores, not be new students to the district, and not take inappropriate tests. If there are not more than 7 eligible students, the CEI will not be computed. We use the same process to develop the course CEIs and the division CEIs. A high CEI indicates that a teacher's students progressed at a greater rate than similar students in the district. For example, Teacher A and Teacher B both have 10 students eligible for the CEI computation. Both had 20% of their current students who passed last year's TAKS test. This year, both have 30% passing that TAKS test. However, Teacher A had 8 of the 10 students who exceeded the average growth, while Teacher B only had 1 of the 10 students exceed the average growth. You can see by the average gain for each of the teachers that one will have a high CEI, the one with the majority of the students exceeding the district average, and one will have a low CEI. This illustrates that the individual student's CEI gains are not necessarily reflected in an overall class passing rate. CEIs and SEIs are computed similarly, but SEIs include more indicators. Let's explore how SEIs are computed. SEIs measure growth in attendance rates, graduation rates, SAT, PSAT participation, AP passing percentage, and AP enrollment. The district establishes individual expectations for achievement for each student at the school based on previous test scores and established school and district trends. The influence of student background variables over which the school has no control is eliminated from the equation. In addition, school-wide variables are used in computing SEIs that are not present in the CEIs. The district then determines the extent to which the school's students on average exceed or fall short of expected performance. Schools derive no advantage by starting with high-scoring or low-scoring students. Lower-scoring students have lower expected scores, and higher-scoring students have higher expected scores. If a student's test score is higher than expected, the test score will positively impact the school's SEI. If the student's score is lower than expected, the SEI will be negatively affected. Let's review. CEIs and SEIs measure student growth from one school year to the next. Only students with similar levels of achievement are compared. Part of the entire process is developing comparison groups with like students. For example, we only compare groups of left students with left students. Using characteristics such as low SES, socioeconomic status, gender, and the like, comparison groups are formed for each student. Once the students' scores are standardized and added together, these scores become the teacher's CEI. Students could have passed a tax test but not have progressed from the previous year. The CEI measures growth of comparable students. The measure is the number of items a student correctly answered on a test. SEIs eliminate influences that schools cannot control. All of the test scores that create the CEIs contribute to the success of the SEIs. SEIs are computed in a similar process as the CEIs. Unlike the CEIs that are confidential, the SEIs are published every year and can be found on My Data portal. It is important to know how much students are learning. Research in Dallas ISD and in other institutions has shown that effective teachers have certain traits. For example, they know the subject matter, teach the entire scope and sequence, individualize instruction to meet students' needs, promote higher order thinking skills, use a variety of pedagogical approaches, use ongoing assessment to guide instruction. The CEIs and SEIs provide an additional tool to determine growth, and it's one way of measuring how well we as teachers and schools are helping each student grow academically. For more information, go to the website listed on your screen.